Yeah, thanks all. Thanks all again for chiming in. A little provocative for building a brand without getting sued. I have ran a similar presentation called The Great Unknown, and there really is considerable unknown in the space of intellectual property. And like never before, you can start a business, you can start it from your lounge room, and you can reach many across the globe. So it's very easy, but there are also some risks involved and some really important aspects of intellectual property that's important that you know. Thank you for the questions coming in today. As far as the format goes, I will share my screen. How's that presentation up now? Beautiful. Okay, the format of today, I'll do most of the talking. We will run three polls, bit of fun, and we'll finish off with a Q&A opportunity. You're welcome to ask questions as you go with Slido. If you've also given some questions at the start of Eventbrite, thank you very much. So if you haven't already, on the right-hand side is a QR code. You can raise your phone to the QR code. Alternatively, you can go to Safari and type in let's talk business. So if you follow the prompts on that screen, that would be terrific. I'll introduce there we go. So I'm principal consultant of Aerium. We're a local, I guess you call it, a business management consultancy. Our brand name is Latin for blue sky, so we try to bring a bit of blue sky to businesses that can be quite cloudy, quite foggy at times. In the context of this audience, essentially, we help businesses start, we help businesses grow and manage all sorts of challenges in the process. So one of the areas that we work in is helping people to build businesses and build brands and protect those. So just to start off with, if I can turn your attention to this first poll, and I'm hoping you've got that up on your screen. If you don't mind nodding for me back to confirm. Thank you.
Yes, so, Ryan, just one small note. You can still see the next slide also. I'm not sure if you can see that from your end.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yes.
That'd be cheating, wouldn't it?
It would be.
So, sorry, which...
And Ryan, we've also just had in the chat somebody asking to be admitted and also to go back to the screen for the QR code.
Thank you, Beck. How's that?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
So yes, you can put your phone up to the who'sy whatsy on the right-hand side there. That'll bring up Slido. Alternatively, you can type Slido into Safari in your phone, and it'll prompt you for the code. Let's talk business. And if you can type that in, I'll give you a minute to do so. How's that, Dan? Is that working okay? It's an honour to have the Mayor here tonight. Thank you, Dan, pretending. And I'll move on to this guy. So if you could please all type into Slido, one after the other separated by a space. What are these three things? Oh no, there we go. Thank you. Barbie, esky, pressure washer. I think it's a reasonable answer. Can I ask, are you still seeing the following slide? Or you're just seeing Slido? Thanks, guys. All right. So we've got eskies, we've got Barbies. We'll shoot back to the presentation and have a look at these. So on the left, we had an icebox. In the middle, we had a doll. On the right, we had a pressure cleaner. So the brands for those three were Willow, Glamour Goals, and Giants. So how lucky is Esky to have such a recall, such a reputation for a product, but it's not even theirs. So we don't call it Icebox. Seldom do we call them by their brands if they're not Eskies. We call them Eskies. I'm just admitting more people. So, yeah, it's really important when you develop goodwill and reputation and brand that you're able to protect it. And these are really, really stunning examples. You know, Brad Pitt was to walk down the street of Morwell and people walked up to him and said, "Hello, Ryan." He'd be quite disappointed, I'd imagine. I know what you're saying. It's ridiculously improbable that anyone would do that with COVID because he can't fly here. But, you know, it's really, really important to understand that when brands develop that goodwill and reputation over time, they're really, really powerful things. So here I'm going to talk about branding. I know John Calabro did a terrific job of presenting branding in the previous seminar. I'm going to talk about branding in terms of people, personality, of timelines, and perception. So I know, Dan Clancy, you're a big fan of Britney Spears. So I thought I'd include for that purpose. There we go. Britney's a really big brand, and I'll cover off Britney a bit later. Richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos, sees a brand as what other people say about you when you're not in the room. So that really is talking a lot about perception. And I want to talk to you about branding in terms of a timeline. And I'm going to talk about the relationship to trademarks in particular. So on the left-hand side, if you're unknown or you're new, you have to make people aware of who you are and what you do. So you have to be unique. You've got to stand out from the crowd. And that's where there's a really strong relationship with trademarks of distinctiveness. So when you're making them aware of who you are, like any person, you have a certain look, sound, value set, dress sense, personality, and style. So in branding, there's heritage and provenance and first impressions, just like operating zone, is really important. Through the time, you've got to be consistent with your branding, to be liked and believed. And you've got to stay in character, deliver on your value proposition. When you get to the point on the right-hand side, I'm just letting another person in. When you get to the right-hand side, it's where you want to be as a brand. You want to be reputed, trusted, revered, perhaps loved. You really want that marriage. And on the bottom right-hand corner, I've got goodwill and reputation again. It's a term important to trademarks in particular. So if you were meeting somebody for the first time at a barbecue and you found them to be quite obnoxious, you probably wouldn't give them a second chance. But if you've got a history with them, you went to school with them, you might give them another go. So it's really important to build an ongoing relationship with your customers through your brand. I want to talk, if it's okay, Alison, take the opportunity to pitch an investment opportunity for you. I know you're all business people, and I really want to talk from a point of inspiration. So, Hogs Breath Cafe. I don't know exactly how it came to be, but you know, you to work up a hunger with the thought of a pig's breath, perhaps breathing down your neck. It's really quite extraordinary. I don't know how it came to be. Perhaps a couple sat down for a steak and said, "Hey, I love steak, you love steak. We should go into business together. Let's have a steakhouse." You know, that's a great idea. Why don't we have a whole heap of steakhouses across the country? Yeah, Ripper. So, you know, what should we call it? How about Hog's Breath? And I suspect the response would have been pig's ass. You know, we're not calling it that. And perhaps even further, they had a discussion, well, Hog's Breath sounds much nicer than pig's ass, so we'll go with that. I still find it very hard to fathom, again, that you can enjoy the smell and the taste of a steak with the thought of smelling a pig's breath. So with that extraordinary example, I was really quite inspired. So I don't know if Michelle Giblet's come online, but I went to Little Grande there in the beautiful Latrobe Valley, in Traralgon, and I said to Michelle, I've got an idea for a restaurant. You know, Michelle, I love the Scottish culture. I love the Chinese culture. I love porridge. I love dumplings. You know, I want to build a nationwide brand covering restaurants. She said, Ryan, self-indulgence is not really a good reason to go into business. You know, you've got to meet the needs of customers. You've got to solve their problems. It's not all about meeting your own needs. And I said, well, nonsense, Michelle. You know, I don't care for the frivolous details. I'm an ideas man. I'm an absolute winner here, and Hog's Breath is a great example of that. So commissioned Michelle, gave her a fairly high-level brief and asked her to build me a brand that captures the culture of both of those countries. So Michelle came back, and without further ado, she presented to me McWox. And I said, holy moly, you've done it, Michelle. That is absolutely brilliant, absolutely stunning. So she took me through the research of the colour and the psychology. The Chinese like the red and the gold, and the red's got some tartan in it. I was really blown away, inspired even more. So we begin with the signature dish, Szechuan haggis, and we're now going to roll out restaurants, first starting in Latrobe City, Dan. I'll say Latrobe City, not Gippsland. Really specific, put on the map. So maybe besides Powerworks, Dredger, to get a lot of the traffic from the highway in. So you can appreciate to this point, I've spent a lot of time, a lot of money, and I'm extremely excited about this opportunity, not just for me, but for you all tonight. And I'll provide details of the prospectus a bit later. But for now, just know that I know I'm on a winner, and I've invested a lot to date. It's certainly well worthwhile. So I just want a quick gauge of enthusiasm here, and if you could ask me if you're keen to invest, with a yes, a Meg Ryan type desk thumping yes, or a pig's ass no. Let's see how we go. Okay, obviously one person said no. We got some yes. Oh gosh, that's not a positive. Right. Maybe my pitch wasn't as good as Michelle's to me. So we do have some interest there. So I'll focus on the yeses, and I'll ignore the dream crushing no's. So what do we think might be wrong with this? Are we able to open up the microphones here, and if you can unmute and express any ideas as to why you wouldn't invest in this incredible opportunity? Alison, were you a yes or no?
Oh, I was wanting to be very supportive of your idea, so I said yes. I do see some similarities with another brand.
Okay. Yep, I can't think of that myself, but which one might that be?
McDonald's.
McDonald's? This is a W, that's an M.
I must have been looking at it upside down.
Yeah. It's got a McWox down the bottom of it. It's got a tartan finish. So it's got a lot of differences.
True.
Yeah. What if I changed the colour to green?
Yes, still that M is just too well known. I just look at that and see Big Mac.
Big Mac, rightio. Does anyone see anything else?
The font on McWox is similar to McDonald's font.
It's near identical, yeah, to be honest. When you have a logo designed for you, the squint test is always a really good measure, because the squint test represents how something may be seen in small form, at a distance, or on the shelf. So you really hit on a good term there about similarity. And when you compare one brand or one logo to another, don't get down the lines of talking about the point of difference, because legally they compare the similarity, and hence the confusion that may be caused. So I'll get to that a bit later. I'll introduce trademarks, but that one will be clearly passing off. It would be representing itself as Macca's, as you say. So what I'm highlighting here is, even though Macca's is a juggernaut, there are literally thousands of trademark owners in Australia that have legal title over their mark. And if your mark is similar to theirs, then you're passing off, you're infringing their rights. And I'll go through that a bit later. Doesn't matter if you do it inadvertently. If your mark is deceptively or confusingly similar to another, then you're infringing. So there's Woolies. I'd say Woolies, based on the squint test, would probably take exception to the colour scheme that we've chosen for our derivative McWox enterprise. So I'm going to talk about copyright and trademarks. I'm going to emphasise trademarks today. What is intellectual property, or IP abbreviated? So Latrobe Valley has long traded on the property that's under our feet. The beautiful soils, the rainfall, for the grass, for the milk exports, dairy exports, timber, paper, coal. By comparison, intellectual property talks about the matter that's between your ears. So IP is a property of your mind or proprietary knowledge. And one of Latrobe City's key challenges in its transition is to have a larger mix of the knowledge economy. So a lot of the modern economies these days have quite, if you look at Geelong by comparison, it is more of a service-centric economy. It's a bit of a mini city, and it has its advantages and disadvantages, but certainly the knowledge, the ideas, the inventions that come out of the minds of people in Latrobe Valley is really important for its future. So if I talk about IP in two ways, on the left we have unregisterable IP, and that's the sort of things that you want to keep secret from the world. So not necessarily secret in all of these, but your branding, designs, your know-how, customer databases, and particular software models or technology, and your business models and plans. So you keep those in-house. On the right-hand side is registrable intellectual property and property that you can protect. So I won't cover off patents today, but patents, designs, and trademarks are very popular categories of intellectual property. Trademarks, registering a trademark enables you to protect your brand. In the middle of it, there is copyright, and I'll cover off copyright. That's the symbol for copyright in the middle. And I'll cover off copyright and trademark in more detail. Firstly, if I can ask that if an artist was to produce a logo for us, we gave them a brief, we gave them a scope of work, they produced a logo, and we paid them in full. Who owns the intellectual property in that logo? So if you go to a friend here, does the artist own the logo, or does the person, the business that paid in full for the logo? All right, we'll wait to see what that's doing. All right, so this is part of the great unknown. Hi, Trish. So you come in screen now. So that is a really common misconception. Just because you pay for something doesn't mean that you own it. A very common mistake in business. I'm going to talk about that more in terms of copyright because it's an easier example to understand. I might jump around a bit guys. So what is copyright? It's a bundle of exclusive rights that belong to the copyright owner. Who is the owner of the copyright? It's the author, it's the creator. And copyright protection is automatically granted. It's not something you need to register like patents or trademarks. Copyright protection is automatically granted when original work is created in material form. And the purpose of copyright is to protect an author's interests and give them control of their work. So the fourth one down there is copyright protects the expression of an idea, not the idea itself. So we might have an idea for a movie plot, but how we detail and how we film and produce that can be an independent expression of that idea. And so we have copyright rights in that sense. So if I was to produce for you a painting for your wall at home or business office, on the right-hand side there, you would own that painting, but you wouldn't own the copyright in the painting. If you buy a book, you own a book, but you don't own the copyright in a book. because you don't have the right to reproduce it. So if I sold you this, it could be original work, it could be a copy or a print of my original work, you don't have the right to then reproduce that and then sell and distribute it. So just because you've paid for it doesn't mean that you own it. So you own the property, the physical property, but not the intellectual property. So with copyright law, you own the copyright as the author for 7 years after you die. When you commission work from a creative artist, from a contractor, from a consultant, unless your T's and C's specifically state that the intellectual property in the works is assigned, and that's a key word, assigned to you upon payment, then you don't own it. You're effectively given a license to use it. Extremely, extremely common. I might get the trademarks a bit later, but I'm going to go back up again. We spoke about that logo, and it was designed, we paid in full, but we didn't address the assignment request in the agreement. And so the artist owns that logo. So it's a very easy fix. You request that the intellectual property is assigned over to you upon payment. So the purpose of IP protection, and we'll cover off trademarks again today, is the same thing applies for patents. It gives exclusive rights to the author as a reward for the expense and effort to bring the innovation to the market, to bring the idea to the market. Because if we didn't have that sort of protection, then ideas could be stolen all the time. So it's there to protect the little guy, it's there to protect the creator and the innovative effort. Trademarks are a little different than patents. Patents have finite time periods of protection, where trademarks can keep going in perpetuity. You renew them every 10 years. Trademarks are considered intangible assets. Intellectual property broadly is an intangible asset on your balance sheet. And it's a really, and it protects the goodwill and reputation in your brand. So most of the large businesses in the world, the biggest business, have a very high component of intellectual property stated on their balance sheet. So Facebook harvests a lot of intellectual property. It harvests all of our data and our interests and all the meals we're eating. And then it sells that data to advertisers. Trademarks. Trademark is a mark of distinction, and it's a way of uniquely identifying products and services. Can be a letter, number, word, phrase, tagline. Perfumes are covered by trademarks. Shape, colour, logo, picture, aspect of packaging. Even Tarzan's yodel is a trademark. And it's a common misperception, again, that if you register a business name or a domain name, you're covered. A trademark trumps all of those. So if you have a trademark in Australia, and it covers you for entire Australia, not any state or particular municipality, you have exclusive right to trade with that mark, and it will trump business names, company names, and domain names. So a lot of startups, they'll begin, I've got my name, there was a letter difference, so ASIC let it through, and I registered domain names and I'm off and running. If someone has a trademark that is similar to your trading name or the name of the products and services that you're trading with, then you're infringing that mark. So the most common marks are a word mark or a device mark. A device mark's a logo. A word mark covers a word itself, how it sounds, not so much how it looks, because a word mark can be represented and stylized any number of ways. So Aerium, as an example, was a registered trademark in Australia, and it's a word mark. Logos, shapes, and so forth are a device mark like the Nike tick. In Australia, Australia is party to agreement of hundreds of countries, and there's international classification of goods and services for trademarks. So when you register a trademark, you register it per territory or country, and you register it also per class of goods and services. So Dove's a really good example. It's in class 3 as a soap, also in class 30 as a chocolate bar. We don't get confused between the two, you know, unless you eat soap. It's not likely to cause confusion. And so these classes and services accommodate that type of application. The process in Australia, it's not dissimilar to many countries around the world. To apply for a trademark in Australia, it's a 7.5 month process from go over here to woe. What happens is in Australia there is a Head Start program, and it's a confidential program where you can submit a Head Start application, and the Trademark Office will assess on whether your mark is deceptively similar to another in the database. If it's not, you get a positive report, and you have to wait 5 months for it to be advertised in a public journal. That public journal is deemed the opposition period. So if you guys wanted to register Aerium and then it gets advertised, I have opportunity only in that 2 months to oppose your application. If I don't oppose, it will proceed to registered status. But they would have well picked that up beforehand, that perhaps Aerium versus Aerium is too similar, and so they would have knocked you back prior. So it's quite a long process, and it's where you've got to engage professionals. It's like you can do this through IP Australia. It's like doing your own conveyancing, but there's a lot of grey areas, and you know, a lot of things to look out for. If you achieve registration, again, no less than 7.5 months from the date of application, you have opportunity to renew that forever and a day, every 10 years. And you have to pay per class, and I'll cover costs a bit later. So we get back to Dan's favourite artist, Brittany. You'll see Brittany has registered the word, it's a word mark, Brittany. And that was first lodged back in 2004. And the word mark Brittany is registered for a multitude of classes. So class 3 is fragrances, class 9 is video or music recording. She has jewellery, whole heap of stationery, class 16, leather goods, clothing, footwear, headwear, and 25. And a few others, and 41 covers entertainment. So you'll see The Voice just wrapped up very recently, and you see plenty of good singers, but you can't just sing to be a global star. They're really looking for a very distinctive character, and you can appreciate that if they're registering all this IP in Australia, they're doing it in just about every country on earth. So they make massive investments to protect the brands, so then they can merchandise the brand. So it's massive business to be a big pop star. So what would happen if we begin trading, when we begin trading, with McWox? What could possibly go wrong? Anyone want to chime in on that?
You might not get accepted for the trademark in the first instance?
Very good point. It certainly wouldn't. That's right. So let's assume that we know nothing about IP, nothing about trademarks, and we've begun business like 95% of startups. Now, a few of them are silly enough to come up with a brand like this, of course. But yeah, the vast majority begin without any consideration of trademarks. So I spoke before about similarity. It's all about similarity, and people get confused. So if you are deceptively similar to another existing mark, then you're passing off. You're representing your goods and services of another, and it doesn't matter if it's deliberate or inadvertent, and you're liable for prosecution. There are a handful of businesses in Gippsland that have got very nasty letters from some high-powered trademark attorneys to the effect of, you're misrepresenting my client's brand, you're infringing their trademark, change your name, change your branding, change everything overnight. Otherwise, we're going to get nasty. So what can they do? They can sue you for profits, income, damage to goodwill, reputation, and they recover their legal costs. Now, most of the time for small businesses, a nasty letter will scare the pants off anybody, and they'll make the change appropriately. And if they don't change, well, then they start to litigate. So why do they want to litigate? Because they want to protect their interests. One of the powers of trademarks is that it covers you nationwide. It gives you the ability to grow into your brand rather than grow out of it. And if you're going to seek investment or you're trying to sell your business, it's very attractive to an investor or buyer because your brand is protected and you have exclusive right to, just somebody else. You have exclusive right to trade with that mark in the country. So if you want a franchise, you need a trademark. With a trademark being property, you can buy and sell it, you can license it. So if you don't have the capital to have a manufacturing outfit, if you don't have the capacity to market, distribute products under your brand, if you have a registered trademark, you can license the right to manufacture, market, distribute. So very powerful in terms of licensing to support a business that doesn't have much capital, and extremely powerful when you want to roll out franchises. So here are some of the businesses. There's just some businesses in Gippsland that have a registered trademarks, and they're in varying classes. So in the creative game in marketing, it's class 35 as an example. Designing websites, illustrations is class 42. So these guys here, they have a number of classes. And with each class, you have a fairly unlimited list of products and services to choose from. So I've looked at your questions that came in, and we can open up to some Q&A. I'm thinking I've answered a good part of those, but I'm hoping that from what I've spoken about thus far, you got these takeaways. Your branding strategy and intellectual property strategy should go hand in hand. You're saying to me, well, we don't want to be a national brand. We don't want to be a franchise. Well, there's two reasons why you want to understand your position in respect to trademarks. One, you want to make sure that you don't get those nasty letters. That's the most important thing. You've got to manage that risk. So if your mark is deceptively similar to another, you could be away down the path with all that investment and all that expense and be asked to change it overnight. Secondly, as I said, they're really powerful assets because they allow you to leverage and license and grow exclusively with that name. I mentioned at the start that in this digital era, you can pretty much work from the lounge room, build a brand. So it's much easier, but it's also more perilous if you are infringing. So if you do have particularly a big idea and a scalable idea, you really want to be able to protect that with the right IP strategy. And I'm sure there may be some questions around cost. So I'm happy to open it up, Alison, to some Q&A. If anybody has any questions or wants me to backtrack to clarify anything.
In the chat, Ryan, there was a question about how the copywriting would apply to writers of resumes and such. If you would be able to answer that one, please.
Yes, if I can go. Thank you, Beck. Yeah, if you don't mind, Beck, just keep narrating what's in that, because I can't see what you're talking about. Can you please repeat that question?
I think it was in regards to the copywriting part of the presentation. The question was, how would that apply for writers of resumes and such?
Writers of resumes, writers of other people's resumes?
Yeah.
Well, technically the writer owns it, yeah, coming back. But you as a writer or a service provider, you might be happy to effectively you're offering a license for them to use that IP for commercial purpose. So the default position is the creator of the CV owns it, but you're probably a pretty nasty person if you tried to keep that to yourself. So it's not dissimilar to any piece of work that you commission by, from a contractor or a consultant. If you want to negotiate and request that the IP in the works is assigned to you, do so. If not, it's a matter of assessing the risk, and there's really very little risk that someone's going to hold on to your CV and hold you to ransom. Okay, is there a trademark database? There is a trademark database. So every country has a trademark database, and I showed you the Australian trademark database with Britney Spears. There is the Trademark Office have a registrar of thousands, hundreds of thousands of marks in the 45 classes of goods and services. And so you're able to go to IP Australia, and there's a trademark search function, and you can have a look, a search for yourself to see if there's anything obviously or confusingly similar. And that mark really is the repository for all the marks. And as I said, you renew them every 10 years. So as a personal content writer, we spoke about resumes, blogs, advertisements. Yep. Going back to that, if you're the writer, then you're the owner. But you might want to agree to assign that over to your client. Costs. Common question is costs. It costs you $330 per class in IP Australia fees. Then on top of that, you'll pay for professional services. If you don't do it yourself, then you'll pay a trademark attorney or other professionals to help you identify the best strategy for filing and then manage the filing process for you. Now that range depending on the service provider, but I would say indicatively it'd probably average around $1,500 per class. So for a startup, that can be a little hefty, but these marks, they last 10 years. So if you amortize them over that period, it's actually quite a low cost and offers you protection in the form of insurance, effectively. Can you see any other questions, Beck?
No, not at the moment.
As a startup, would you recommend seeking a trademark with consideration of the fees? You should look at a minimum on the trademark database to see if there's something similar, so you know you're not stepping on anybody's toes. So you know that you're not going to get that nasty letter. Now, you can have a quick look, and it might be something that's quite obvious to see. It's probably the less obvious ones to see, which would be a concern. So yes, you do that to manage risk. And secondly, if you're a startup with grand plans to have a brand that you can grow in or a national scope, then a trademark should certainly be considered. So what's involved in an IP strategy? Oops. I'll go to the top one first. Is there a local company that can sort all this stuff out for a business? Yes, there is. Aerium, we provide this service, and we provide that with a backup with some real high-end trademark attorneys in the city. So trademark's quite a specialised field, not known or often procured by a small business or startup. And the attorney that we use is over $700 an hour. It's a very specialised area. So where we operate as Aerium, we work with a lot of local creatives. And when a client wants a brand to be a big brand, those creators will flag the need for an IP strategy, and then we'll get involved then and there. So what's involved in an IP strategy? Firstly, it's really understanding what your plans are for your business, your range of products and services. And then from a trademark perspective, it's a matter of conducting an audit to determine what goods and services and classes apply. And then, as I said, because IP Australia charges per class, you can then build up the costs of an IP Australia fee. And in the audit, you get a sense of whether the mark is easier or more challenging to get through the process. That's probably a big question, what's involved in an IP strategy. It's also looking at your business, the importance of IP in your business, and looking at the things like your T's and C's. So I've worked with a lot of creatives to help them manage their T's and C's, because they don't want to be compromised either. They don't want to do a piece of work for a client to find the work that they have done infringes another mark. So you'll often see in their T's and C's, but that they request the client to review the registrability of and the intellectual property components of the work. So they often put that liability onto the client, and they by and large have to, because it can make it quite cost ineffective for a creative to start to do the trademark work. So if you're a creative, just as quick an example, if you're a creative agency, then class 35 covers marketing and 42 design, and you'll be up for $660 to protect your mark, to protect your trading name, and then in the order of $3,000 of professional fees. It'll last you 10 years, and you renew every 10 years per class with IP Australia for $400, and that's a direct transaction with IP Australia. Are there any more questions? You can't see questions, Beck, in what I can't see?
No, I think you've answered them all there.
All right.
Oh, sorry, one more has come through. Is logo and name one class?
I'll go to the logo bit. the logo would be your mark, and your mark would apply to a range of products and services, and quite possibly to multiple classes. So if you want to do a logo on clothing, and let's say it's called logo, just to be super creative, then you would seek to register that logo in class 25, and then you would apply that mark, and you would list in class 25 headwear, footwear, and clothing. So yeah, it's per class that cover a range of products and services. So a lot of you, with the questions here, you would probably only require 1 or 2 classes to cover your interests. The most important thing, the most important message for you today is whether you take up trademark advice, whether you seek to apply for trademarks, it's important that you know that you may be inadvertently infringing the rights of another, and that might place risk on your business. It's the most important thing, an 80-20 principle. But then if you have the desire to have a brand that you want to grow into and a large scale opportunity to trade with that brand, with that mark, then you really ought to be seeking trademark protection and registration. All right, Alison.
So, yes, does anyone have any other questions before we wrap it up for this evening? No. Great. Well, thanks so much, Ryan. I personally wish you all the best with McWox. I'm sure it's going to be a raging success. In all seriousness, thank you for presenting this evening. It was really informative, and I hope everyone else found it to be beneficial as well. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is a series of webinars that the Council is putting on, and we will be hosting another one next Tuesday, which will be held at lunchtime at 12 p.m. And the topic for that one is how to build a business during a crisis. So if that's something that's of interest to you, please jump over to our Eventbrite page and register your attendance for that one. And Ryan, I'll just get you to swap me back over to host so I can grab the recording of tonight's session. And as mentioned, that will be going up live on our website in the next couple of days if you wish to review or get any other information that you may have missed from tonight's session. Great, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you all for chiming in again, and yeah, I'll get the prospectus out to you in the coming days. Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone. Good evening.